All right, today we're going to be looking at setting up web push for doing push notifications from the web. We're using Rails 7, and we're going to be using the notice gem to kind of give us that base notification functionality, and then doing a custom delivery method with it. So I've included a repo in the description, and with this, where our starting place is I've got a Rails app with a user account set up using clearance, and I've scaffold posts. And I've also already set up noticed. So just jumping into things quickly, we've got in our post controller, when a new post comes in, we're going to create a new post notification, and we're going to deliver it to everybody. That post notification doesn't have really too much going on here. It's just going to be stuck into the database. And that's really all that's going in there. There's nothing really special. The users have notifications, and that's just from noticed. Our notification here is connected to it, but there's nothing really going on there. So there's nothing really special going on right now, but this is kind of where our starting spot is. A couple things to note additionally, doing stuff with service workers and background stuff does require HTTPS. So I did set up a certificate for that. If I look at the proc file in here, I'm going to be serving the SSL instead of just normal Rails server. So that's in there. And the only other thing is I'm using ESBuild, and actually I have a separate config file for this. So this here is just watching application.js, and it's going to spit that out into the app assets build. So this is pretty standard. With the web worker stuff, we're going to do a couple of things. So that's kind of why I want to point this out, because when we get to the service worker, we're going to have to have it spit out a separate file, but we'll talk about that when we get there. I'm reading some notes off to the side. Yeah, so that should be good. Okay, so let's talk a little bit of architecture, what we're building here to make things work. So with that base foundation, what we're going to be wanting to do is add some JavaScript on the front end, service worker on the front end, and we're going to be doing some web push stuff on the back end. The JavaScript stuff on the front end can start off very simple, where it's just requesting permission for notifications. So we're going to set that up. When we get into the back end and the service worker, that's going to be responsible for the push notification itself. So we can do notifications, non-push notifications, with any of the other service worker stuff. But the service worker lets us do stuff in the background when the browser's closed and whatnot. So that's kind of the different components that we're going to be having in place. Yeah, so that's good. And I've lost my notes windows. Here we go. All right. So pulling up. All right. So for requesting notification permission, this has to be triggered by a user action. So what we're going to want to do is we want to add a button onto the page where you can actually request notifications. So this should go somewhere good, but I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is just create a simple button. I'm giving it the enable notifications ID. By default, I'm making this hidden because I don't want it to show up. But to do that, I need to add a class for it, because this is a really raw setup currently. So it doesn't have anything. So we're just going to have a .hidden display none, and let's disable that for a second. Okay, so we got our enable notifications, and by default, that button is going to be invisible. We don't actually want to be showing that. All right, in our so that's all we're going to have to do in there. In our application.js, there's a bunch of different ways that you could set this up, but what I want to do is just do something really raw and basic. So I'm going to copy this over here. So when the page loads, and I've got turbo enabled on here, so we're waiting for a turbo load. What we're going to do is we're going to check the notification.permission. This is going to return either granted, denied, and we're going to do some stuff in those cases. By default, we're going to prompt for notifications. So what is that prompt for notifications going to do? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that notification button and bail early if it doesn't exist. And I'm going to remove the hidden tag, so the button is now going to show up. If the user clicks on it, then we're going to request permissions. And just to test things out, if they say it's granted, we're going to pop up a notification right away, or else we're going to yell at them and say it was declined. And then we're just going to make sure that any errors are handled. And then after everything, regardless of what happens, we're going to want to hide that button. So this here is going to give us the non-push notifications. So if I refresh, I can go enable notifications, say always block. It's not going to yell at me. If I go in here and click on the settings, I can unblock it, reload the page. And this time if I enable it, then it's not going to work. Oh, I've got do not disturb turned on. I'm going to turn off do not disturb. And let's try that one more time. You don't get notifications when do not disturb is turned on. So that is still, well, you can see that they're coming through. Why are you not popping up though? I think that's automatically turned off because I'm doing a screen recording, which is annoying because I do want to have that show up. All right, well, I'm going to have to probably pop in there a bunch of times. So that's a little bit irritating, but it will still be all right. Okay, so that's kind of step one. This gives us permission to actually show notifications. So once we've got that done, now we actually need to kind of wire in the back-end side of things. So with that, we're going to be needing to set up some encryption keys to be able to do a communication back and forth. So in the base project, I've already included in the gem file web push. And web push does a lot of the heavy lifting for us. So what I am going to actually do in here is I'm going to be actually using credentials for this. So I can go Rails, Rails credentials, edit. And Rails credentials edit. And why are you All right, so we want to edit the credentials. While I'm in here, I need to actually be able to generate the credentials. So I'm going to go into the separate terminal. I'm going to Rails C, and in here we can do web push dot generate key, and then we have a key dot public key. And key dot private key. So we can bring those in to our credentials. So in here, I'm going to do a web push. I'm going to do the public key. and a private key. I just copy those in. Make sure that trailing equals. All right, so those are good and saved. And this was being a little weird, so I'm just going to confirm that that worked properly. Yes, it did. All right, so we can kill that off, and now we can restart the server. So we now have those credentials available in our application. All right, so the trick here is we need to be able to get that to the JavaScript in the front end. One of the ways that I like to do this is just putting into the head. So this is a little bit convoluted. So what we're doing here is we're getting the credentials. So we grab that there. We are base 64 decoding them, and then we are grabbing all the bytes for that to spit it out. And that's just the way that I found best can be pulled over most reliably into the JavaScript world. All right. So hopping back into our application.js, and here we're going to do a couple things. So one is we're going to stop throwing out that test alert, and what we're going to do is set up our subscription. All right, and I've got a little chunk of code for that. All right, so for our setup subscription, there's a couple places where we might call this. So I'm going to confirm again that it's been granted, and I can confirm that I've got a service worker. In here, I'm then going to get the vapid key, which is what we had just generated a moment ago. So here we're going to grab that web push public, and we're going to parse it and stick it into a U8 int. We're going to register the service worker that we want to have, wait for that to be ready, create the subscription, and for right now, I'm just going to spit that out onto the console. So that's what's going on there. Now this service worker doesn't exist. So let's hop over here and let's make service worker. All right, so this is, I'm just doing console.log. Hello world. Okay, with service workers, unless you start doing some stuff with headers and you have support issues, service workers need to, or can only be used by addresses below where it is. So by default, this is going to be in assets/service worker. That's where you typically see it to show up in Rails. But that means that it can only affect pages in assets/whatever, which is not what we want. So we actually have to serve this up from the root. So that's why I set up the ES build differently. So I'm going to grab this block here, duplicate it, and I can say for this is for the entry point service worker .js, and here instead of spitting it into app assets build, I'm going to spit this out into public, and everything else can stay the same. So just to test this out, if we yarn build this, this is now going to spit into the public service worker. Beautiful. So that's how that's working. So these updates are going to be going to the service worker.js here, and not into the kind of normal location you'd expect to see it. And checking my notes, make sure I didn't. And actually, what I would probably be doing as well is ignoring those files from gitignore. All right. So if we've done everything right there, that should be good. That should be good. That should be good. And we should be able to run this again, request notifications, and use that to now see that subscription come in. So let's give that a test. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to remove it again. I'm going to make sure that that's unregistered. So we're kind of starting fresh. And I'm going to reload this page and actually bring up the console and enable notifications, allow, and boom. All right, so this is spitting out our information. So we can see in here the endpoint that we're going to be hitting. We've got no expiration. Our keys, we have an auth key and a P256DH key. So these are the keys that are being used to do the communication back and forth. What's happening is server side, that's getting mixed in with that vapid key that we create to make sure that everything's encrypted and secure and doing all the right stuff. So this here is all working perfect. That's what we want to have going on. All right. So with that working, what we're going to want to be able to do now is save the subscription. So in here, we're going to do a Rails G model. Let's call this a web push subscription. This is going to be referencing the user. References. This is going to need an endpoint. It's going to be having an auth key. And the P256DH key. And you could store other information here. So let's say I want to have a user agent or something. Those keys probably should be encrypted. So if you use something like the, what is it? The Rails encryption that's kind of built in is a good way to go about this. I'm not going to bother for this the sake of today, but that'd be a good thing to do there. So we're going to do that, and we're going to Rails DB migrate them. Actually, these you probably want to have these as null false. It's going to give you bad data otherwise. So we'll Rails DB migrate that. All right, and so our subscription belongs to a user, and our user has many web push subscriptions. So those are now tied together. All right, so with that in place, what we're going to want to be doing now is creating the route where we can store that. So resources, we have our web push subscriptions. And for this, we are only worrying about creating stuff. For our controller, we're now going to have the web push subscriptions controller, preferably spelt right. So for this, we're going to be having a create action, but just take care of a couple things first. This is going to be coming, this is going to require the person to be signed in. So we want to make sure that we're using the require login, and this is coming from clearance. But this is more like an API endpoint where it's not necessarily going to be coming from the front end. Especially if you're doing some stuff with the service worker. The service worker is not going to have access to the CRSF token that would be on the front end. So I am going to be skipping that before action. To verify the authenticity token. All right, so for our create, we're going to be making a subscription. And this is going to be the web push subscription. And if I'm just going to have this blow up if there's anything wrong. So our user is going to be the current user. Our endpoint, that's going to be coming in from the params endpoint. Our auth key is going to be from the params keys, and this is just the information that's coming from that subscription object that we're given. Our P256DH key is coming from the params keys, and that's the P256DH. So, and I'm going to do something like here. So I can do I don't have that user agent, but I can go sub dot user agent equals request dot user agent. And this is where you could customize and do whatever else you want to do. Assuming that goes well, I'm just going to return a head OK. All right. So that's pretty much all we have to do for that controller. In our JavaScript, so here, instead of console.logging this out, what we're going to do is post that. So we can just do a fetch in here. So we're going to the web push subscriptions. We're posting the JSON, and we're just stringifying that subscription. And I'm just checking my notes. All right, I think that should be all right. So let's hop back in here. Let's remove that again, reload, bring up the console, and let's take a look at network and enable. So I'm seeing a post. That looks like it all worked. And if I go and do the web push development in our database, we've got our subscriptions, and that's now in there. Perfect. All right. So with that, we're now saving that. So the next step is to actually use it to do stuff. All right. So we can close this and close this and close these. Okay. So at this point, everything's kind of tied into store and work with those notifications, but we need to actually set up that delivery mechanism. So let's do delivery methods in here, and let's do web push.rb. So we've got a class delivery methods. So this is coming from the recommendation. This is coming. This will be part of the notice gems system. So we're making a new, well, actually, let's take a step back. Let's go into here. So in here, I can go deliver by web push, and that's going to be using delivery methods web push, which doesn't exist. So we have to create that. So in here, we have our web push delivery method, and this is going to be using noticed delivery methods base. All right, so with this, we have a deliver method, and for this, we're going to get the recipient. So this is on an individual recipient basis. So that's going to be the user. So we want to get all the web push subscriptions dot each. So these subscriptions are going to have a delivery mechanism that's kind of standardized across them. So what I'm going to be doing is doing subscription.publish, and this is going to do the notification.data, which doesn't exist right now. So in our notification, we're going to set up that data. So in here, I'm going to go something like title and say something maybe like new post. I'm going to give it a body of params post dot title. So I'm going to grab the title of it, and I could do something like I don't know, URL is the URL. So that's going to be that's coming from this here. So that's going to be the URL for the post itself. Actually, yeah, that works. All right, so we have the data from the notification itself. We've added that delivery method, but this publish doesn't exist. So let's set that up. This is actually, it's a little bit of a chunk of code, but it's pretty straightforward. So in here we get the data. we're going to be using the web push gem again here to send that payload. The message, I'm going to be JSONifying the push. I'm going to be hitting the endpoint and the keys that were provided, and I'm passing in my vapid credentials. So this takes care of all of the stuff for communicating back and forth. So at this point, I should be getting that inbound push notification. And this is where we get to the service worker. So in our service worker, I'm going to do a chunk here to update. So I like putting this version thing in here. That way I can change things and make sure that stuff is updating properly, because I found that I ran into that problem a lot where I didn't know it was using old versions and stuff. So this here is just logging out something. Nothing much is going here. This is really the core of what's important. So in here, we're receiving the push. We're going to extract the JSON data. Just going to console log out something. And here I'm using the title for the title, the body, and I'm passing along that data so I can use it later on if I want to. All right, so just make sure everything's cleared up. I'm going to unregister. I'm going to take that off. So I'm completely kind of clearing this out again. And this is actually to avoid a problem that we're going to fix later on. So I'm just going to go in here and make sure that I'm kind of starting to clear slate. So in here, reload, enable notifications. Yes, we're going to allow it. We don't have anything notifications right now. We're back in here. Let's bring this up so I can see. So now if I hop over to this other browser and do a new post and say test post, this should push out an error. Unless I have a typo. So in our delivery methods, turns out doing the right code helps. Let's try that again. All the typos. Delivery methods. Third time's a charm. That's promising. And we got a failure in here, so let's make this bigger and see what's going on. Error performing delivery method, name error on local vary recipient. What did I typo there? Recipient. Like I said, fourth time is the charm. All right, it looks like that worked, and I didn't receive the push. Let's check over here. So if I come in here and I inspect the worker, I'm getting hello world over here. I'm not getting, let me see what my public looks like. That never updated, which would do it. Do I have a issue with my service worker? Let's just make sure this is build. And let's try that again. So we are going to unregister this, reload this. Let's clear that out. And all right. So let's try that one more time. All right, so we got the accept one, activating push. There we go. So we're looking at the right code now. So fifth time, this is going to let us. Ooh, hopefully not 55. All right, received push. That looks good. If we open this here, we can see new post, fifth. Beautiful. All right. So that is now working. Now, if I come in here, so that's working. This is the basics of things now. So this here is working, functional. We're getting those push notifications. And if I wasn't doing a stream, then it would actually be popping up. Okay. So if I come in here again and I kill that off, reload, enable notifications, allow, what's going to now happen is we've got two of those subscriptions ready. If I go in here and I go back to the post and I do number 6 and hop into the console, boom, it blows up because in here it's saying this web push subscription has expired. So that's the next thing that we want to be doing, is handling that. So if we come in here, we're going to try and push. If it fails, we're going to rescue. So we're going to rescue that web push subscription. This is where I do something like rails.logger.info. So this isn't an error. This is something we should be expecting. So I'm not going to put it as a warning or anything like that, but it's kind of helpful to know. Expired subscription. We're going to say removing expired subscription. And here we're just going to do subscription.destroy. I don't see much reason in keeping this around to save it for debugging issues or something like that. Like if it's expired. You can debate me on that. Let's hop back to the post. Let's do number 7. So right now, let's clear this out. So right now, when we did this before, subscription A blew up, and then subscription B never continued on because this loop busted. So now if I do number 7, then you can see in here that I deleted the one. And if we go in here, we can see we received 7. So that handles that situation of that expired subscription. The next thing that we want to be doing is, so currently if you click on that notification, it just brings up this page, which might be fine. But we could also have this do something where it actually will use that URL. So it's not going anywhere. It's actually just bringing up the tab. What we actually would want to do is have this actually probably respond in a way that's appropriate. So in here, what I'm doing is a notification click. So in here, I'm going to close the notification. I'm just going to log something out. And then I'm going to open a new window going to the URL that is in that data. So as long as you're following that as a standard format, you can use this. So you could also do something where you could do something like close notification. If not URL, we're going to return. That way you just bail. But in this case, I'm actually going to want to open that URL. So let's go in here. I like to just unregister this. It helps take care of making sure that things are correct. So we're going to re-enable that notification or permissions there. And if I go into here, new post, number 8, create that post, I get that 8 notification. If I click on it, that's going to open a new tab onto post number 8. So that's how we can handle that. So this now lets you click on things to do something interactive with those notifications. The other thing, so back when I first talked about setting up the web push subscription, we said that we can do stuff from the service worker. So this is the type of thing that we'd want to be doing. If the push subscription changes for some reason, so this would be if it expires, this lets us grab a new subscription and push that to the server automatically. So that would keep things up and running fresh. The other thing that so if I come in here right now, if for some reason I made a mistake, actually that's going to be out of date. If I accidentally deleted this, I'm no longer tied in. So if I come here, I'm not going to get any notifications. So this is actually a good place for in our application where this setup subscription, this is going to be a place, we can do a similar type of thing up here for if it's been granted. So we can, I don't know, send subscription. And I actually didn't remember to make a snippet for this, so hopefully I get it right. So in here, we can do something like an async function. And in here, we're going to go and still want to grab that stuff to make sure. We're going to want to grab that registration. So in here, we're going to go await. This is navigator.push manager.subscription. So I want to grab that subscription, and then we're going to, I think this is, let me double check this. Let's see if I did that right. Yeah, I did not. I think it's actually on the registration. So registration dot push manager dot get subscription. Yeah, there we go. So we're going to get that subscription, and that should now work. Yep. And we're going to forward this to the server. So now we've got our subscription, but here's the problem. If I refresh and refresh and refresh, oh, look at all the subscriptions. That's no good. So the last small change is in our controller. And here, instead of create, we want to do a find or create by. So now when I refresh, we just have that one. So as long as you're sending the same subscription information, it means that we're going to keep on reusing the same. We're not creating a whole bunch of duplicates. And if I now come, so even now, if I come in here and delete the subscriptions because I messed something up, I now come here and refresh the page. And then I come over here and I make a new post. So let's clear this out. So if I do number 9, we have number 9 here. So, all right. So that's fully working from end to end. What you're looking to do is you set up your JavaScript. That's going to prompt for permissions, and that's what's happening here at the very top. Checking things and then doing that prompt. And then creating the actual push subscription and continuing to forward it along. For our service worker, the main thing in here is when a push notification comes in, we're going to be putting its title, body, etc. When it's being clicked or updated, we're forwarding that to the server or opening Windows or taking whatever action is appropriate. On the server side, we set up the vapid keys that are used with web push itself. We created this custom delivery method. We added that delivery method to the notification. And in our subscriptions that we're saving, we use web push to push that chunk of JSON out. And that is your whole system for doing web-based push notifications. This works on, as long as you have the SSL stuff set up, this will work on Chrome, Safari, Firefox. This works on Android and iOS with the what is it, 16.4 iOS. So this gives you basically global push notifications everywhere. There's a bunch of other stuff you can do with push notifications where you can include additional information, tags, and icons and whatnot. But that's all additional tweaking and customization as opposed to kind of raw functionality. But this is enough to get you up and running. All right, take care.